cannot be with our children 24/7. There are times when we need to find qualified caregivers to take care of our children. And that could be an in-home daycare or a daycare at a church or a facility. And so there's some things that we do to keep, to make sure that we're making the right choices there and putting the safety priority on our children. And so one is that this place has qualified staff. And so if you are a caregiver, you need to make sure that you're hiring people by kind of using 3 screening tools, and that would be a background check. But that you don't want to just stop there, because the background check isn't foolproof because many offenders have not been convicted yet. And so it's important to follow that up with an in-person interview where you're giving the candidate some situational scenarios. How do they handle boundaries? How are they with children? And see if they really know the ins and outs of actually caring for children. And then finally, you would definitely want to make sure that you check references, whether they're professional references or personal references. And again, ask those people, how are they with children? Do you see any red flags with the way they behave with children? So that's kind of the first thing, is you've got your staff, and that's how a place should hire their staff. So it's important to ask them, how do you hire people? What do you do to screen them? And then secondly would be the environment, and that is it a safe place? How many children do they have? What is the ratio of teacher to children? All of the situations should be observable and interruptible, and that can be done by making sure there's lots of windows if there's classrooms, so a parent can walk in and take a look, and also that caregiver or teacher knows, I'm being watched, I'm being observed, and so they're less likely to abuse a child or have any opportunity to do so. You'll also want to walk around and make sure there's no secluded or isolated areas. Daycare providers should also have a code of conduct, which outlines all of their policies and procedures of how their staff handles any situation with a child. And it outlines what their safety procedures are and what the parents' rights are and what the children's rights are. It's really important for us to educate our community so that they can spot red flags and notice situations, whether, not even just when you're hiring someone to take care of your child, but there's a lot of other situations that we find our children in with sports activities, dance organizations, after school things, where we would want to also make sure that they're safe. And so one of the biggest ways we can do that is eliminate one-on-one situations. We know that 80% of the time when a child is abused, it is because they have been in a one-on-one situation with an adult or even an older child or teenager. So it's important for us to be aware of and teach when anyone is working with a child, they need to be taught rules and policies to follow. And so an example would be, if a child has to go to the bathroom, we would not want just one person taking that child to the bathroom. We would want one adult with 2 children or more children, or we could have 2 camp counselors with multiple children. That way someone is always observing what is going on. And so that's a good example. Or let's say you're a coach and you're trying to talk with an athlete. It's okay to talk with an athlete one-on-one, but you would want to make it public. So you could sit on the bleachers, pull them aside, and have this conversation sitting side to side with them so everybody can see it and what's going on. Other things that we'll see people face is, say they're somewhere and a child needs a ride somewhere. You should never give a child a ride by yourself. If there ever happens to be a situation where you have no other option, then you need to get on the phone with either your supervisor or the parents and say, I am taking Johnny home. They're in the car with me. Would you like to talk to them while I'm driving them home? And that way you're protecting that child and yourself as well. The easy thing is, the right thing is not always the easy thing. But we have to be vigilant when we're working with children. One of the things that we like to let the community know is what are red flags? And red flags are warning signs that a child could be in danger. And so some red flags that we see common among someone who might be grooming a child would be that they get really close in with a family. So we know that 90% of the time a child is abused by someone that they know. But at Gulf Coast Kids House, it's 97% of the time a person that abuses a child is someone that that child knows, possibly loves, and trusts. And so they can be an older adult. They could be a family member like an uncle or an aunt, coaches. They can also be older children and teenagers. So 40% of the time children are abused by an older teenager or child. So what they often do is that a groomer might be at the ready. They're always willing to fill the need that the family has. So if the family has an emergency situation and they have to leave the child with someone, they're right there ready to help. But they overdo it. They might, they fill that gap of perhaps a child's loneliness. So they'll take them on outings because mom and dad might not be there. They give them gifts. So if you ever see a child getting really special attention where they're getting a gift but nobody else in the room, the classroom or on the team is getting a gift, that is a red flag because no one should get special attention. It should always be rewarded among everybody. When we're talking about child safety, it's also our job as adults to teach them about appropriate adult behavior. And one of the things that can help in that is us using the proper anatomical words to talk about body parts. And so when we can talk about all of our body in a respectful way, then we can also talk about the dangers and red flags that are out there in a respectful way. So at a young age, parents should teach their kids, this is your nose, this is your shoulders, this is your penis, this is your vagina, and not use nicknames for those things. Because what happens is if a child is trying to disclose and they've used, say, a nickname like it's your cookie, an adult might not realize that they're talking about their vagina. And so it's we can miss and just dismiss that a child has just disclosed to us that something has happened to them. As I've said before, we know that when it comes to like face-to-face abuse, it's 90% of the time someone that a child knows. But now we have the internet. And I like to call the internet the new stranger danger because when we are online, even if it's a phone, we never know who is on the other side of that technology. And so there's some things that we can do to keep our children safe when it comes to internet dangers. And the first is monitoring their time. Whenever I go out into the schools, I always find a child just proudly raising their hand. I have spent 10 hours on a Saturday on the internet, and they're very proud of that. But when I talk to parents, I tell them that a child that's on the online 10 hours, that it might be a lonely child. That's an unsupervised child, and that is a vulnerable child. And that is what our predators are looking for. And they groom them online as well. So we need to monitor children's time and make sure that it's in smaller chunks and they're not spending all day. Because what will happen is a predator will begin to talk with them either in a chat room or a party room. They might actually be verbally talking to them with their headsets. And if a child's just mindlessly playing a game, they might possibly just be answering those questions. And I'll tell you, when I go to the schools, I always ask kids, what are people asking you online? And the things that I get are you a boy or a girl? How old are you? Where do you go to school? Do you play sports? If so, where do you play? Where's your practice? And so you've got to teach kids to make sure that they're not giving any personal information online. One big red flag that a student told me, and I've heard this about 3 or 4 times at the schools we go to in Escambia County, is children have been asked, are you home alone? That is a big red flag. To me, that is a potential groomer trying to find out what's going on in this child's life. Are they lonely? And so some of the ways they groom is they will say, so what's your favorite music? Oh, that's my favorite music. Or I love soccer. Do you love soccer? Hey, do your parents talk to you about alcohol? And they're like, no. And they're like, well, if your parents aren't going to talk to you about it, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. And then that begins to grow and grow and grow. And eventually they might even talk to those kids about sex and things that no parent wants a stranger talking to their children about. So it's important that we're always talking to our kids about the strangers online and that they never give personal information. And that is simply as, even your information as a parent. They shouldn't give your address or your credit cards or anything, because they can use any of that to harm the entire family. So when it comes to digital safety, one of our biggest tools that we can have is an open communication with our children. So you can get all the monitoring software and buy all that, but it's really about that connection that you have with your children, to let them know that it is okay for them to come to you and show you a text that might have been abusive in some way. And you can help them use this as a teaching moment to talk them through how to handle those situations, and that you want them to let you know what's going on. So what I usually recommend to parents and children is that they create kind of a contract with their parents that, hey, mom, dad, if I come to you and tell you what's going on online with me, will you promise not to take away my computer, or promise not to take away my cell phone? And then the parent needs to say, well, I may need to do that temporarily because I might have to clean off a virus on your computer because you opened up a website that's dangerous. But I will give it back to you, with some boundaries and some rules to follow. But if a child knows that they can come to you and you're not going to just say, this is it, you can't have it anymore, then they're more likely to do that. And it's important for us as adults to help them navigate things that are very complex for them to navigate. Also, a great tool in that communication realm with children is to ask them to teach you. Let them be the teacher. I have not found a kid that doesn't love to tell their parents all about the internet and show them what's going on. And so you want to ask, what apps do you have on your phone? Can you show me how that app works? How are you using that app? And then you're also kind of helping them process, is this something that I really do want to be engaged in? Is this safe? And so again, that communication is your number one safety tool online. So one tool that we as adults have that is extremely effective is a bystander intervention. And that is that we are letting people know that we've got eyes on them. We're watching them. And so the way we can do that is really simple. You can describe a behavior, set a limit, and just move on. And so an example of that would be, let's say that an uncle has come over to someone's house and they're having a niece or nephew sit on their lap, and you can tell your niece or nephew's not very comfortable. So what I can do is I can say, hey, Uncle Joe, I think Sally is finished with the lap time, and Sally, why don't you go ahead and go play with your cousins outside? And so all you've done is you've described that, okay, they've got some lap time happening, that uncle knows you have observed them, and they might not have been doing anything wrong at all. But if they were, you have intervened in that situation and you have prevented a potential child abuse situation. And so you've minimized that opportunity, and you simply just sent the child away. They've moved on, and no one knows that anything is any different. With the information and knowledge that we have shared with you, our main goal is to minimize any of those opportunities where child abuse occurs. So I've given you a lot of tips, and I have given some examples that you can use and red flags to be looking out for in the environment and in the interactions that you see children having with adults or older teenagers and children. And you can use all of those tips, but also make sure that you use kind of just your inner gut. If you don't feel like something's right, it probably isn't right. And it's important to not be a bystander, but to stand up and make that phone call to 1-800-96-ABUSE, or go online on our website and make sure that you click on the link that goes straight to DCF to make a report. Because a lot of times what you're doing is you're offering services to a family. There might not be a child abuse situation happening, but you are really helping in that environment because they might need some services that will reduce some stress and eventually prevent a potential child abuse situation. So our goal is to have our community educated and knowledgeable so that we can just wrap our arms around the children in our community and protect them and make sure that they are safe, because they are an extremely valuable asset, and what we do now will affect their lives in the future. And so protection and prevention is our goal.